Welcome to the Guitar Department. My name is Joe Alton. I'm your host. On this episode, we're going to talk about Sweet Home Alabama by Lynyrd Skynryd and some of the expert fill work done by the guitar player Ed King on their recording. Welcome to the Guitar Department. Sweet Home Alabama by Lynyrd Skynryd is made up of 3 chords, almost entirely through the entire song. It's a D chord, a C add 9 chord, and a G chord. We have a lot of different ways of outlining that throughout the song, and we're going to talk about all of them throughout the course of this episode. It starts with that iconic intro, though. Ed King wrote this, came into the studio with his Fender Strat, but ended up playing it live mostly with a Les Paul like the one I'm playing here. So it starts off with a D chord shape, but you don't actually need the middle finger down on the bottom string. You're just going to have your pointer finger on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string and your ring finger on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. You're going to leave the middle finger off. You can put it down if you'd like, but you're not going to play that string, so you don't actually need the note there if you don't want. And then, with your pick hand, you're just going to play the 4th string twice, and then drop down 2 strings to the 2nd string and play the 2nd string, then the 3rd string. Just like that, leaving every note ringing out along the way. And at that point, you're going to take your pointer finger off and add your middle finger to the 3rd fret of the 5th string. Now this creates sort of a makeshift C add 9 chord. If you fingered a full C add 9, it would have the pinky here at the bottom and your pointer finger on the 4th string. But we don't need either of those notes. So when I play it, at least, I don't finger those notes. I just play the 2 that I have that I'm going to need. So at this point, with your pick hand, you're going to play the 5th string twice, and then jump down to the 2nd and 3rd strings again, just like we did on the D chord. And then we switch to our G chord. Now the G chord is actually the simplest one in this case. We're just going to bring the middle finger up a string and take everything else off. Now again, a full G chord can be fingered a number of different ways. You can have the 3rd finger and pinky down with the pointer finger here, or you can do it with just the 3rd finger on the bottom string, or any other version of G is probably accurate. But in this case, we're only playing the top string, the 6th string, and the 3rd string, which is open. So we just need the finger on the 3rd fret of the top string. So to recap, we have our D chord, our C add 9 chord, and our G chord. And then at that point, the song plays a fill. We have Ed King playing a fill. It's a different fill each time. The first time he does something like this, which is a major pentatonic fill. Not the hardest thing in the world to play, but a little bit complicated compared to the beginning of the riff. Part of what makes this a real guitar player's song, though, is the fact that every time he hits that G chord at the end, the fill that follows it is a little bit different. So as a guitar player, you have the freedom to manipulate it a little bit, and especially if you were Ed King in the studio writing the song, you have the freedom to play whatever you want. What he did is mostly stuck to what we call a G major pentatonic. So that scale starts on the 3rd fret and then goes 0, 2 across the next 3 strings. And then on the bottom 2 strings, the 1st and 2nd strings, it'll be 0, 3. So that first lick itself hammers on from 0 to 2. You're going to pluck the 0, slam your finger down on 2, repeat on the next string, then take that finger off, pluck a 0, all the way up to the 3rd fret of the top string, the 6th string, and then jump down to the 3rd string with your pointer and pull off from 2 to 0. Just like that. Now, the second time he runs through it, right at the very beginning, he plays a different lick entirely. He's going to stick to this third string for the whole lick. And you start off with 2 zeros. And then you grab the second fret, pluck it, and pull off. You're going to pluck that string one more time. Move your pointer up to 4. Pluck the 0 one more time. And then grab the 5 and give it a slight bend. Just like that. And then from there, the riff itself sort of loosens up. Instead of playing like that, he just plays the top string twice and gives a little strum across the chord. And notice at this point, I'm actually playing the full chord. I'm fingering the entire chord, mostly as a safety net in case I overstrum and hit another string. It still sounds okay as long as you're fingering the notes that are in the chord. It will still sound okay. And that's our intro to Sweet Home Alabama. So, we've learned the intro and the verse. Now let's take a look at the chorus. Now, Ed King would have you know that you start off with a 5 and a 7, but you don't actually play on the first downbeat. You skip the first downbeat. Like that. It's a common misconception that that first one's actually played, but it's not. So, what I've done there is you go up to 5 and 7, standard power chord, pointer finger on the 5th fret of the 5th string, third finger on the 7th fret of the 4th string. And you just sort of mute the first beat. You can hear sort of a percussive, like a string scrape there, but you don't necessarily have to play that if you have a band. Second beat, you play the chord, and then on the third beat, you reach up with your pinky and grab the 9th fret of the 4th string. Now that's the same string that your ring finger is already on. So when you play the two of them, the pinky note is the one that rings out. And then you take that finger back off and play it again as a 5 and 7. Just like that. Notice that I upstroked on that second chord after the 9. Just like that. Then you move it down 2 frets and do it again. Then we move the whole chord up a string. We're on the 3rd fret with the pointer finger on the 6th string, ring finger on the 5th fret. And this one's a little different. You're going to hit down, mute, and then go to 7 with your pinky. At that point, if you need to, for reach purpose, you can take your ring finger off because you're not going back to the original chord afterwards. Just like that. And then we have our last fill for the chorus. So, hammer on from 0 to 2 on the 5th string. Down a string, a hammer on from 0 to 2 again. Open 0 on the 4th string there, so 0, 2, 0, 2, 0. And then you grab this 3rd fret, the C, with your middle finger. Give it a slight bend, like a quarter step bend. And then you're back at it. Now, of course, again, that fill changes with times, but that's the most common one that he plays in the song. We don't have time to show you every single fill that he plays, but I recommend you look up videos of him playing it because you'll learn quite a few good major pentatonic fills, southern rock style, sort of a country style also. It all sort of blends together at a certain point. So if you really deep dive on this song, you'll learn quite a bit about the lead licks. But the structure of it is really pretty simple. Now it's time for the interlude. And for the interlude, we're going to move all the way up. This is the part that plays between the verses between the chorus and the verse sometimes. And we're still outlining the same chords. We're going to outline a D chord, a C add 9, or a C chord, not in this case, not a C add 9, but a C chord, and then down to G. And it sounds like this. And the way that works, you come up to the 7th fret, and so we call that 7th position. You're going to pluck this 5th string, first finger on the 7th fret, and you're going to play 7, 8, 9. And then the real point of this is to hit the 7, 2 strings down. So 7, 8, 9, and then skip the 4th string and go to 7 on the 3rd string. But when I do it, I actually play the 7 on the 4th string and the 3rd string. Adds a little bit more chordal texture, a little bit more tonality to it. And then back to the 9 with your 3rd finger. And I slide it down to 7. I've seen some people pull off like that. I prefer to slide down to 7 with my ring finger, and that puts me in 5th position to outline the C chord. Now, in this case, it's a little bit different than what we did on the D chord. The D chord's 7, 8, 9. This one's just going to go 5, 7. There's no 6 in between like we would have played if we moved it parallel. So it's just 5 to 7, and then down a string, flatten out across the 2 strings. Notice the little stop in between the 2 notes. It's not, it's... And then we're going to move all the way down to our 1st position. And technically it's our 2nd position because your pointer finger is going to play at the 2nd fret. But you're going to pluck a 0, hammer on a 2 on the 5th string with your pointer, and then with your pick hand, just go down 2 strings, playing zeros all the way across, and then grab your 3rd fret on the top string with your middle finger, almost like you're fingering half of a G chord. Again, the bottom half would be down here, but we just don't need it. And then that repeats. And that's the interlude to Sweet Home Alabama. And now it's time for our lick of the week. And this week, I've chosen one of the licks that Ed King uses in the solo to the song Sweet Home Alabama. Now, he does a lot of stuff in this solo, most of it major pentatonic stuff. And again, if you're really into Southern rock lead playing, or if you're just looking for an intro to lead playing at all, I recommend you look up this solo in its entirety. But he does one lick that sort of stands out in my mind as the peak of the solo. And that is coming up here to the 12th fret, so what he's actually doing is playing a repetitive arpeggio speed pattern. He's got his middle finger on the 14th fret of the 4th string and the pointer finger on the 12th fret of the 3rd string. Now that pointer finger won't move through the entire lick. We're going to play our 2nd finger on the 14, and then the first time he does it, he plays a 14. Pulls off from 14 to 12, and then back to his original 14 on the 4th string. Then it immediately moves up to 17, and you can see I have to sort of stretch out to do this. I believe he does it twice on the 17. And then that 17 turns into a 16. So we have 14, 12, 16, 12, like that, and then it repeats. And he does this 6 times in a row with the 16. Just like that. And then he starts over at 14. He does the 14 twice. And then twice on the 17. So the only variable is which note you're playing on the 3rd string when you pull off to the 12. It's 14 twice, 17 twice, and then 16 6 times, back to 14, twice there, and then twice on 17. So that's how he plays it in the solo. Now you can use this lick a number of different ways, but really just the concept is something that you should get used to. It's a really cool speed concept, and it's actually pretty simple to use if you use it up here in this range. And that's our lick of the week. And now it's time for us to enter the tone zone with our pedal of the week. Now, this week, we have the MXR Phase 90. And the MXR Phase 90 is iconic for a lot of reasons, but the most obvious one is Eddie Van Halen. Eddie Van Halen used this in a way that sort of was innovative at the time, because most of the time modulators work after your drive in your signal chain. So you have your distortion set up, and then you move on after that to your modulators, your choruses, your flangers, stuff like this. We've done a couple choruses before. This is our first phaser though. And so we'll start with, what does a phaser do? Let me go ahead and click it on. And this is what a phaser does. You can see it, or you can hear it's almost modulating the EQ band more than anything. It's not really affecting the pitch too much. A little bit of warble in the pitch, but it's mostly the EQ going from a dark sound to a brighter sound. It's a really easy to use pedal too. You can see it only has one knob. So we click it on, and this is what it does. Now the knob controls how fast the modulation is. So if I speed that up, if I turn it all the way to 3 o'clock, you can see it's got that sort of modulated sound. It's a really easy pedal to use, and an easy pedal to find a use for also. When you hear it, you can sort of hear what context it would be used in. However, the way Eddie Van Halen used it was a little different. He put it before his drive circuit, and you can see next to the MXR Phase 90, I've got a drive pedal here. I decided to go with the EVH 5150 Overdrive, which is just an amazing overdrive pedal that we'll talk about probably sometime in the upcoming episodes. Let me go ahead and click that on. We'll give it a second here. So, the way Eddie Van Halen used this was before his drive to add just a little bit of warble, a little bit of really slow phaser effect to his lead playing and to his rhythm playing. So right now I've got it set to about 9 o'clock, which is pretty slow. It actually maxes out its slowness at about 7 o'clock. So we're just barely dialed up at all here. And that gives us sort of a fake Eddie Van Halen sound. Now, we're using Eddie Van Halen's pedal, so we do sort of emulate the sound that way too. But give this a listen. So it just sort of adds a little bit of something to the riff. And then, of course, you can't talk about Eddie Van Halen without tapping a little bit. Now, I won't pretend to sit here and say that I can play like Eddie Van Halen does, but I can certainly tap for you. So give this a listen. So you can hear as I'm doing that, the signal almost sounds like it turns in on itself. It just has this really slow modulation effect. And that was one of the things Eddie used to add texture to his playing, his lead playing and his rhythm playing. And that's our pedal of the week, the MXR Phase 90. Well, thank you for tuning in to the Guitar Department. I'm Joe Alton. I've been your host. I want to thank Riemann Music for giving us a place to shoot this show and for supplying our wonderful Marshall amp, the Epiphone Les Paul that I've been playing, and the EVH 5150 Overdrive that I used for our Pedal of the Week display. I want to thank our producer Bryce and our camera operator Taylor. Be sure to join us on Facebook at facebook.com/The Guitar Department. And I want to hear from you. Let me know what you'd like to see me do on this show. Would you like to see me teach a certain song or a certain technique or some sort of style that I haven't covered yet? Let me know on facebook.com/The Guitar Department. And thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time right here on MC22.